I'm glad that there is an absolute commitment to advancing the goal of European integration. We have very ambitious plans.
We are a very ambitious country. We are a very ambitious government. We have a special minister for European integration in our cabinet.
We are changing the face of our country to become member states on the end of the day of European Union.
EU member is our goal, is our vision.
We want to be part of Europe. We want to be economy and open society.
Who in their right mind would actually want to be a colony?
Zanimljiva za sve. Šta je Jugoslavija za nas koji u njoj živimo?
Za mene Jugoslavija je simbol nezavisnosti.
Ja Jugoslaviju shvatam kao nešto što svima može da pruži sve.
Jugoslaviju stvari vidim stvarno kroz jedan brzi razvoj, brzi tempo.
Samoupravna zajednica naroda i narodnosti.
A ja mislim da nije lako reći da je Jugoslavija.
I don't think my early childhood in Yugoslavia was bad at all. I always got a lot of presents, the family was close, and close friends were the extended family.
So it was a very close culture, and people really cared about each other in so many ways that you just don't see that here in the same way. It's people are isolated from each other, they work and they go home and they just watch television in the evening.
We liked to watch TV as well, and even had a camcorder, which I, being the cinematically gifted child that I was, always tried to get my hands on. What I really wanted was the camera he was holding. When Mom took over the camera so Dad could come, I changed my story. I was a clever child, clever like a fox, which was one of the characters of my favorite show. Good night, kids. Sometimes my parents would flip the channel to the Parliament, where there were more bedtime stories.
Ja hoću da kažem nešto jednom priču. I za nas i za njih. Moja je priča. Dobro. Uhvatili su dedu i unuka kako su naišao je neprijatelj i trebalo je da potraže put. Dobro, vi se smijete. Kraj će biti vrlo tužan za nas.
Pa dajmo da čujemo tužan kraj, molim vas, dajte konačno.
As I was getting a little old for those kinds of stories, I did what every Yugoslav did in the summer.
1 month free vacation with pay. Oh, when was the last time I had a month vacation?
We Yugoslavs had it every single year. But I never noticed. I was too young during the times of communist Yugoslavia. Now I know what you're thinking. Communism?
It's an international criminal conspiracy.
Well, for 2 decades prior to 1980, Yugoslavia was prospering with its annual GDP growth averaging 6.1%.
A decent standard of living, free medical care and education, guaranteed right to a job, affordable public transportation, housing and utilities, literacy rate over 90%, life expectancy was 72 years. Most of the economy was in the public, not-for-profit sector.
Yugoslavia was a different case because it had established its own form of a socialist model of economic activity, which was a mixed economy with private capitalist enterprise, with state-run industry, and with worker cooperatives.
It was considered to be a success story of market socialism. It had higher rates of growth than most of the countries of Western Europe. It had an advanced welfare state. It was a multi-ethnic society which lived in harmony, and in many regards it was a model of development.
I guess you could say there really is something special about this land. So why have people spilled so much blood over this land? Who was to blame here?
Obično je kriv onaj koji je najmanje sumnjiv, to bar ja znam. Pročitao sam tolike romane u nastavcima.
Before I continue, where are we? Yugoslavia was located between Greece, Italy, and Romania, and it was populated by Serbs, Croats, Bosnian Muslims, Slovenes, Macedonians, all of which are Slavs, and Albanians, Hungarians, and others. Their country was the result of a long fight to unite the people, to show the world what they can achieve if they work together, regardless of what happened in the past. Throughout history, this idea has been a thorn in the eye of many empires and world powers.
The idea was that the southern Slavs would not remain weak, divided people falling out among themselves or falling prey to some imperialist outsider.
Serbs lost their freedom after the Ottoman Turks attacked them in 1389 on the Field of Blackbirds, which is called Kosovo.
With the Serbs, the loss of statehood that lasted several centuries, for instance, produced a strong anchorage in the myth of Kosovo.
Journalists come to Serbia and say, why are you Serbs so darn crazy that you celebrate a battle that you lost? You talk about the Battle of Kosovo, and you're always talking about a battle, how great it was, that you fought to the death, but you lost. Aren't you guys masochistic? Isn't there something wrong with you? And I said, ever heard of the Alamo? Remember the Alamo? Ever heard of Masada, in which the Jews defended to the death and then committed suicide rather than to be captured?
For standing up against the Turks, Serbs were persecuted and inventive torture devices were implemented.
We lived under terrible persecution. We were whipped. We were lynched, except the manner in which we were lynched was by impalement. We were impaled. Now, if you don't know what impalement means means a sharpened stick is put up your anus, driven through your body, and exits through your back without going through your vital organs. There were experts, Turkish Ottoman experts, who did that. So you were impaled like Christ was put on the cross to suffer.
There was, however, a way to avoid all this. Convert to Islam. And many did. Many had no choice. This made a part of the Slavic population Muslim, while the rest was Christian Orthodox. On the other hand, the state religion of the Austrian Empire was Roman Catholic, with a large Croatian population greatly influenced by this. When the Austrians illegally took over Bosnia and its large Yugoslav population in 1908, the Yugoslav dream had never been more threatened. So a group of Yugoslav nationalists, Young Bosnia, which included Serbs, Muslims and Croats, decided that enough was enough. A young man, perhaps you've heard of him, Gavrilo Princip, shot and killed the Austrian Archduke Ferdinand in Sarajevo. Afterwards he was quoted as saying, "I am a Yugoslav nationalist, aiming for the unification of all Yugoslavs. We must be free from Austria." Although the assassination of their Archduke did kind of make the Austrians mad, and heck, now they had a reason to attack the last Slavic stronghold, Serbia. This was, however, not the real reason for the attack. The Austrians and Germans had a plan to expand their empire to the east. War was the only way they'd achieve this. During the early period of World War I, a bunch of Yugoslav politicians fled the Habsburg Empire and formed the Yugoslav Committee in London to raise funds and realize the Yugoslav dream. Towards the end of the war, the committee met up in Corfu, Greece with the Serbian government and declared that Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes were, quote, the same by blood, by language, by the feelings of their unity, by the continuity and integrity of the territory in which they inhabit undividedly, and by the common vital interests of their national survival and manifold development of their moral and material life. It was what the Austrians and Ottomans had feared. The old world order was gone. Yugoslavs finally got a country of their own. The Kingdom of Yugoslavia was sadly short-lived, because another war was brewing soon, the likes of which the world has never seen. In hopes of keeping Yugoslavia out of the war, Yugoslav Prince Paul signed a tripartite treaty with Nazi Germany in 1941, but the British didn't like this, so they encouraged a coup d'etat and mass rebellion against the pact. The British were happy, now Hitler wasn't, In fact, he was so angry, he wanted to wipe Yugoslavia off the map. Yugoslavia was attacked from all sides.
Yugoslavia at that time was divided up into 12 pieces, and some of it went to fascist Hungary, some of it went to fascist Italy. Macedonia went to the Bulgarians and the Albanians, and Serbia was occupied by the Wehrmacht and ruled by the Germans. Croatia and Bosnia were united in a Croatian fascist state under the Ustaša regime.
This was called the independent state of Croatia.
The idea, of course, in 1941 was that Croatia would be a condominium for German power in the Balkans.
The Croatian fascists were quick to start eradicating all non-Croatian elements in the state. You know what that meant? Serb hunting season started. Yes, Hitler's final solution was applied here as well, and hundreds of thousands of Serbs, but also Jews, Roma, and others, were killed, most of them at the fourth largest concentration camp in Europe, Jasenovac.
The total number of 600,000 were killed at Jasenovac. The Croatian fascist regime, the Ustaša regime, had one aspect that was very distinctly different, and that was that it was a clerical fascist regime. It integrated into its political dictatorship the Catholic clergy. They were at the top of the government, in the leading councils of government, and they were also in the military, and they were also in the concentration camps. They were at Jasenovac. Some of the actual camp directors were priests.
Croatian Inquisition, which took place in World War II, makes the Spanish Inquisition just look like child's play.
Pope Pius supported this fascist regime. The top leadership of the Vatican was fully cognizant of what was going on there.
On the other hand, royalists loyal to the crown, called Chetniks, decided to act.
The Chetniks were the resistance movement which, even though proclaimed itself the Royal Yugoslav Army in the fatherland, was composed almost exclusively of the Serbs. However, after the bloody German reprisals in Serbia in the fall of 1941, the Chetniks realized that continuing resistance at any cost, when the Germans were killing 100 Serbs for a single dead German, was self-defeating and suicidal.
This didn't matter to the West, though. They just wanted dead German bodies. So, all aid to the Chetniks was cut and shifted towards another group of fighters who managed to neutralize all other groups, the Yugoslav partisans. The communists, made up of members of all ethnicities, were led by a guy called Tito. In 1943, Tito declared the new Yugoslavia, which was finally liberated 2 years later. Tito, if nothing else, was brilliant at playing political games with big powers for his own interest, which is just what Yugoslavia needed to gain complete independence. It's important to say that Tito wasn't just a leader, he was a brand, recognized in the world. He was one of the founders of the non-aligned movement. And why were they so important?
They were able to play a middle ground for the great powers that allowed the great powers to potentially talk to each other and discuss certain issues that could not be talked about openly.
He hopes to perform the difficult feat of walking both sides of the street, east and west.
Tito's strong arm kept the country together. When he died on May 4th, 1980, many in Yugoslavia were crying. Maybe not so much for him as much as they were crying for Yugoslavia itself. His funeral was the largest funeral for a statesman in recorded history. Then things started to fall apart when Yugoslavia began to get into debt to international creditors shortly after Tito's death. In 1984, while the eyes of the world were pointed at Sarajevo, where the Winter Olympic Games were being held, the Reagan administration was specifically targeting the Yugoslav economy in a secret memo, National Security Decisions Directive 133, which stated that U.S. policy will be to promote the trend towards a market-oriented Yugoslav economy. And it was in line with previous decisions directives which advocated expanded efforts to promote a quiet revolution to overthrow communist governments and parties.
It triggers a whole series of other initiatives, most of which are not published. The decision directive simply states that what the United States would want to achieve is that Yugoslavia cease to be a market socialist economy and become a free market economy model on the West.
As the Soviet system was on its last legs in 1988, Washington wasted no time in sending advisors to Yugoslavia from a non-profit organization with a high-sounding name, the National Endowment for Democracy, or NED.
Good morning and welcome. It's good to have you all here to help celebrate the launching of a program with a vision and a noble purpose. The establishment of the National Endowment goes right to the heart of America's faith in democratic ideals and institutions.
However, Alan Weinstein, who planned the NED, told the Washington Post in 1991 that a lot of what we do today was done covertly 25 years ago by the CIA. This basically means that the NED was really a sort of CIA spin-off.
Instead of having just the CIA going around behind the scenes and trying to manipulate the process secretly by inserting money here and instructions there and so forth, they have now a sidekick, which is this National Endowment for Democracy, NED.
Thus, the NED started handing out generous bribes in every corner of Yugoslavia, financing opposition groups, buying up hungry young journalists with dreams of a new life, and financing trade union opposition, pro-IMF economists, and human rights NGOs. The National Endowment for Democracy also controls and pays for the Center for International Private Enterprise, which in turn funded the G17. Who were the G17? They were an NGO made up of 17 free market economists, with 3 of the leading members being Washington-based staff members of the International Monetary Fund and World Bank, Dusan Vujovic, Željko Bogatic, and Branko Milanovic. G17 coordinator Professor Veselin Vukotic worked closely with the World Bank, and as the Minister of Privatization under Yugoslav Premier Ante Markovic, he was in charge of the World Bank bankruptcy program in Yugoslavia during 1989 and 1990, which led to the devastation of the Yugoslav economy. Other members of the G17 consult for the World Bank and attend World Bank-organized meetings. In 2002, they formed a political party in Serbia, and since then, despite the fact that in every election they've gotten between 7 and 11% of the popular vote, G17 controlled the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Economy of Serbia. This is not simply a group of economists. It is a network. The IMF and World Bank use this network to impose their policies on Yugoslavia. And how do they do it? First, they force governments to do away with any social protections, subsidize food or rent, free transportation, free medical care, all those things you don't really need, out the window.
You cut back in public sector spending, you cut wages, you cut employment, you abolish worker management enterprises. In other words, you force your people to work harder for less.
Second, they use economic manipulation and new laws to force businesses, public and private, into bankruptcy.
The World Bank describes this mechanism as a trigger mechanism. And they use that term. They say we need to trigger the bankruptcy of Yugoslav industry.
Then, these businesses are taken over by a small clique of leveraged buyout speculators and other powerful foreign economic interests. They purchase the businesses at rock-bottom prices.
Creditors could simply take hold of these enterprises within a 45-day period, and either the enterprise had to close down or it was privatized.
This is called privatization through liquidation. World Bank data confirms that under Vukotic's direction from January 1989 to September 1990, more than 1,100 industrial firms were wiped out. The standard of living declined 18% between January and October 1990. This downturn raised unemployment to 20% and thus increased tensions between the republics.
Impoverished the population through these sweeping IMF reforms, which in turn contributed to heightening social and ethnic strife.
So you have dissatisfaction of everybody, and everybody's looking for a guilty party.
Čovjek kad nema ništa i kad nije osvešćen u egzistencijalnom smislu, on se hvata za one vrste ideja koje mogu da probude u njemu čovjeka. A to su najčešće te nacionalne priče, te religijske priče, jer on osjeća se nekako bitnim kad ga neko osnovi, pa da, oni su krivi, a ne ja.
In desperation, Prime Minister Markovic visited Washington to meet with President George H. Bush. He said that rising tensions among nationalities would be a consequence of his austerity privatization plan. So he asked for $1 billion in aid and said that if aid didn't come, there would be trouble. And we all know the Americans didn't want any trouble.
In November 1990, President George Bush went to the U.S. Congress and pressured them to pass the foreign appropriations law that called for the cutting off of all aid and credits to Yugoslavia. The law also demanded that if any republic in Yugoslavia wanted further U.S. aid, it would have to break away from Yugoslavia and declare its independence. Okay, it's not a conspiracy theory, it's not my speculation, it's not my analysis, it's a public law. It's a public law. It required the U.S. State Department approval of election procedures and results in every one of the republics. It required that the republics do not hold national elections, but hold elections only in their own republics, and that the aid would go individually to those republics. And when the aid did go, it went to those groups which the U.S. defined as democratic groups, which meant small right-wing ultra-nationalists and even fascistic parties.
This fracturing of Yugoslavia was not the result of pre-existing internal divisions. Those internal divisions were heightened as a result of an outside intervention.
By 1991, the inflation was 200%, and the Yugoslav federal government was unable to pay the enormous interest on its foreign debt, or even to arrange the purchase of raw materials for its industry. Credit collapsed, and recriminations broke out on all sides. Cooperation between the republics and the Belgrade central government virtually ceased.
The republics were not getting any money from the federal government, they weren't transferring any tax revenues, so the whole federal fiscal structure had collapsed, and the republics were left to their own devices. And then came in, of course, a new form of nationalism.
As the Americans demanded, multi-party elections were held, and economic policy was at the center of the political debate, as nationalist and separatist coalitions ousted the communists in Croatia, Bosnia, and Slovenia. And with the republics at another's throats, both the economy and the nation itself embarked on a vicious downward spiral. Of course, the local political figures did their best to calm the people down.
Nemojte da mislite da nećete odvesti Bosnu i Hercegovinu u pakao, a muslimanski narod možda u nestanak.
The people needed a hero to save them, someone with their interest at heart. Instead, they got these guys. In 1991, elections were held in the Bosnian Republic of Yugoslavia. Alija Izetbegović, a former Nazi collaborator in World War II, was a candidate who had an Islamic vision for the mainly Christian Bosnia, as professed in this little book he wrote. There can be neither peace nor coexistence between the Islamic religion and non-Islamic social and political institutions. Alija lost the elections to the moderate Muslim leader Fikret Abdić. Losing the elections didn't stop our Alija, though. He made a deal with Fikret, where Alija would be president, but would quit after a year. So, faster than you can say Islamic declaration, Alija made sure his presidency was extended due to the crisis, as you can't have a power struggle in such tragic times. In fact, there was a moment when Alija could have prevented the war, when he signed the Lisbon Agreement in 1992, which would have made Bosnia a confederation of 3 regions. Alija didn't like this. He wanted all the power. Luckily for him, the Americans didn't like this peace idea either. So the American ambassador to Yugoslavia, Warren Zimmerman, stepped in.
So Mike Habib was in this meeting with Zimmerman and Izetbegović. Izetbegović had just come back from Lisbon, and Zimmerman says to him, well, you know, you could get a lot more from U.S. recognition if you just waited. And Mike Habib told me his jaw just hit the floor.
If you don't like it, why sign it? Alija took the American advice and withdrew his signature, fortified his power, and the Americans recognized it. Another guy who just loved his power was the one, the only, Slobodan Milosevic. Slobo, as the masses like to call him, knew how to use those masses to get what he wanted. With a little luck and help from his close friend Ivan, the president of Serbia, he got sent to Kosovo in 1987, where Serbs felt threatened by the Albanians. During a scuffle with the police, one Serb asked Slobo why the police was beating them. Slobo then rightfully proclaimed he became an overnight star as the protector of all Serbs. However, this incident with the police was fairly localized. This guy needed a bigger stage. So, because he was so thankful to his friend Ivan, he booted him from the presidency. He also got him killed a decade later. You'd think that after Slobo became the new president of Serbia, he'd calm down. But no, he still needed a bigger stage. And what luck, a big anniversary was coming up. As Serbs were marking the 600th anniversary of the Battle of Kosovo, which is the crux of their historical culture, waving Serbian, Yugoslav, American, and well, Canadian flags, singing patriotic songs, Slobo took the stage and what the West described as a nationalist call to arms inflamed the audience.
Jugoslavija je višenacionalna zajednica I ona može da opstane samo u uslovima potpune ravnopravnosti svih nacija koje u njoj žive. Kriza koja je pogodila Jugoslaviju dovela je do nacionalnih, ali I do socijalnih, kulturnih, verskih I mnogih drugih manje važnih podela. Njihovo otklanjanje olakšat će otklanjanje drugih podela I ublažiti posljedice koje su te druge podele izazvale.
All right, maybe it wasn't that inflammatory. But at least the opera singers afterwards were pretty cool. But if you think this guy had high ambitions, what about a guy being compared to Jesus Christ?
Danas je Krist triumfalno ušao u Jeruzalem, dočekan I pozdravljen od naroda kao Mesija. I glavni grad Hrvatske danas liči na Jeruzalem. Franjo Tuđman dolazi pred građane.
Holy f***, the savior of the Croatian people, Franjo Tuđman. No pressure, eh? Now, Franjo won the elections fair and square, but the people around him weren't really that good at hiding what was going to happen next. Even these guys aren't buying it. Franjo's government was quick to arm themselves illegally.
Nismo naoružavali HDZ-ovci.
Yeah, right. What about this? It seemed like war was the only option. Thankfully, there were many citizens who just said no.
Nećemo mi ići putem zavađanja naroda.
Yugoslavs stood a lot to lose if Yugoslavia broke up. For 50 years they grew up together, lived together, married each other, and at the center of all this was Bosnia, with a mixed population of Muslims, Serbs, and Croats, a sort of mini Yugoslavia in itself. Massive anti-war rallies were held in its capital, Sarajevo, which had the largest number of ethnically mixed marriages, with a message to the politicians: don't sacrifice peace for political ambition. But with little higher interest in keeping Yugoslavia together, the politicians decided to send a message of their own to the demonstrators. Slovenia and Croatia were the first who decided that peaceful negotiations weren't working out for them, so they unilaterally declared independence in 1991.
Odločil da postane samostojna in neodvisna država.
Bosnia followed in 1992. All of them were quickly recognized by the West.
When the White House announced that we would be recognizing Slovenia, Croatia, and Bosnia, we at the State Department had no idea what that decision would be before it was announced, which is a very peculiar state of affairs. I was a desk officer, the office director. Nobody at the working level had any idea what the White House would decide. So you can say that the decision was a political one. It was not based on a careful consideration of what recognition might entail.
It was, in essence, a dependable way of making conflict inevitable. The question was, would the people buy it? Of course, as history has shown, there was one surefire way to mobilize public opinion in favor of a conflict and bring them back to the World War II mentality where all Serbs became Chetniks and all Croats Ustaše. Hardcore propaganda.
Čujte srpski dobrovoljci, bandu četnici, stići će vas naša ruka i u Srbiji.
Moja specijalnost je ubijanje četnika.
Mi smo Srbi supermeni, ratujemo protiv sveta, za rat sveti mi smo spremni, makar trajao i stoleta. Hrvatska se krvlju brani.
Slobodno recite da ste ustaše i jeste došli u svoju domovinu.
Ustašama poručujem kao što im uvijek sam poručio, a to je malo i vulgarno, jebaču im i oca i majke.
Došlo vrijeme da se Srbi svete, sve džamije u oblake lete.
Sad koljemo kaškom za cipele i to zajeđalom. I onda se nikada autopsijom ne može ustanoviti čemu je žrtva podlegla, da li posljedicama klanja ili tetanus.
Jasenovac, igra Niška Sara, Jasenovac, igra Niška Sara. To je kuća, Maksovi mesara, to je kuća, Maksovi mesara.
Ja mislim da sve djevojke misle ko i ja, da ove fašiste četničke treba poklati, poubijati.
Vi ste slomili kičmu četničkog neprijatelja.
Srećan prolazak kroz minska polja uz pjesmu Učini bar jedan pogrešan korak.
A tamo je i razrušeni Vukovar. U kojem neprijatelj iskazuje i dalje genocidnost, masakrirajući vukovarske Srbe.
Hrvate.
Slika iz Vukovara sve govori i u potpunosti negiraju sve tvrdnje hrvatske zagrebačke propagande o ubijenim Hrvatima.
Slike iz Vukovara sve govore i u potpunosti negiraju sve tlapnje beogradske propagande o ubijenim Srbima.
Yep, they were all pretty much the same.
Ratovi su pripremljeni i prirode ratova pripremljena je mnogo ranije, pre nego što su sami ratovi počeli. Kada su već ratovi počeli, uloga medije je bila da dodatno homogenizuje, da dodatno brutalizuje, da donese nove motive ljudima da učestvuju u ratu i da budu što je moguće gori.
Pa eto, kad gledam televiziju, vidim šta se radi i želim da pomognem i vredi žrtvovati za ovu našu Srbiju. To je život.
There was no official military mobilization. It all worked on a voluntary basis.
Ti. Vi ste dobrovoljci.
One man, though, who could make a difference, realized where this madness was heading. His name was Josip Kir.
Moj suprug je 1991. godine bio načelnik policijske uprave Osječko-baranjske županije. Tada nije bilo vojske, hrvatske vojske. Dakle, sve probleme koji su početkom rata dolazili rješavala je policija.
As rebel Serbs had put up roadblocks to control passages towards Serb-populated areas, Josip Kir, who was a Croat, decided to resolve these issues in a peaceful manner.
Isključivo pregovorima on je i uspijevao ukloniti svaku barikadu. Moj suprug nije dijelio ljude po nacionalnosti, dijelio je ljude na dobre i loše. Očito mu je to bila i mana, jer tada je HDZ bio na vlasti i ekstremni dio HDZ-a se nije slagao sa njegovom mirovnom politikom.
Kir was quickly becoming an obstacle to the aspirations of the Croatian HDZ and had to be taken out.
Mog supruga je ubio HDZ-ovac, hrvatski državljanin, Antun Gudelj, a on je samo izvršitelj.
Who ordered the assassination, however, remains unresolved.
I tada je jedan tisak na dan njegovog ubojstva objavio naslov Otišao Kir i Slavonski mir.
Yes, the war had started, best characterized by two words.
Ethnic cleansing.
Ethnic cleansing.
Ethnic cleansing.
Ethnic cleansing.
Ethnic cleansing.
Ethnic cleansing. The term, however, was nothing new in the Balkans, as it was first used in World War II to describe how the Croatian Ustaše were cleansing Croatia of unwelcome ethnic elements, such as Serbs and Jews. In the minds of the Serbs during the 1990s, this was very much engraved in their national memory. Franjo didn't care because he knew he had the support of just the right people. German Foreign Minister Hans-Dietrich Genscher, in almost daily contact with Zagreb, gave his go-ahead for Croatian secession and actually pressured its Western allies to recognize Slovenia and Croatia.
Ja, Švaba, znao sam. Ko će na Srbine da udari nego Švaba? Kako on bre više ne dosadi, je?
The German Serbophobia, it was geopolitical in the sense of 1914 and 1941. And that continuity also reflected itself in the almost visceral preference for the Croats and the Slovenes, who after all had belonged to the German cultural and state structures for hundreds of years.
There was, however, one problem in this plan. The Serbs, who were now a constitutional people of Croatia. That pretty much meant that no decisions about Croatia could be made without the Serbs, while Serbs and Croats had an equal status. Now, Serbs were facing increasing discrimination by the Croatian government.
A lot of people were killed outright and threatened. People lost their jobs. It wasn't just Serbs, even, say, Croatians whose married partner was Serbian faced similar discrimination.
Franjo knew this all too well. So what did he do? He wrote a new constitution.
The Constitution says that Croatia is a country of Croats. That's automatic ethnic cleansing, constitutional.
By creating such a Croatian constitution, Franjo violated the Yugoslav constitution, which he considered invalid. But he still wanted to keep the internal Yugoslav borders. The Serbs had a different idea. What the Croatian Serbs wanted was to have control over the lands they populated, their own self-government, their schools, a right to preserve their language, culture, and national identity. The Croats really wanted the same, feeling threatened by what was now being described by Zagreb as the Serbo-Yugoslav giant. The Serbs thought, well, if the Croats can separate from Yugoslavia, why can't the Serbs separate from Croatia? After all, the same thing happened in America back during the Civil War. When Virginia seceded from the U.S., the northwestern part of the state seceded from Virginia to form West Virginia that was loyal to the Union.
And when I got there, when we inspected the lines, and these guys all told me these heroic stories of how they were just simple peasant Croats that had been, patriots. And the JNA was this formidable fighting force that they had overcome. And all the weapons that they had, they said that they had to capture from the JNA. Well, that might have worked on someone else. When I looked around and I did my int training, and I knew who made various Kalashnikovs, and every single one of the weapons carried by these guys, everything from machine guns to sniper rifles, was all made in East Germany.
Even though Croatia never officially admitted that Germany was arming them, they decided to thank the Germans with a song. In German, so only the Germans would understand.
If you follow that bouncing ball, just recently, just last summer, Croatia donated surplus, I forget how many, 4,000 or 5,000 Kalashnikovs to the Afghan National Army. Those aren't surplus. What they're doing is hiding essentially a murder weapon.
The Serbs had more than enough weapons, and they were too eager to crush the Croatian army.
A što se ove njihove armije tiče, znate, to 20-30 četnika rešava sve.
The Croatian town of Vukovar was under siege for 87 days, which later brought a Pyrrhic victory to the Serb forces. Why Pyrrhic? Well, because they actually destroyed the entire city.
Vukovar se pročuo po cijelom svijetu po žrtvi koju je tom prigodom doživio. Naime, poginulo preko 4.000 stanovnika Vukovara.
A horrific example of how territory suddenly became more important than the people living on it. Even though they were brainwashed into thinking they were doing the right thing, some people woke up and realized what was really going on. Milan Levar, a Croat who was determined to protect his town of Gospić from the Serbs, was among the first to join the newly established Croat army, but quickly became disillusioned after an order he received.
Milan Levar je bio hrvatski branitelj koji je 1991. godine dobio neke zadatke da likvidira neke srpske civile, što je smatrao nečasnim i nemoralnim i odbio je to izvršiti.
1992. u 6. mjesecu on se skinio iz vojske zato što nije htio izvršavati izravne naredbe nadređenih ovdje u Gospiću koji su tada vladali.
I nakon toga je obavještavao nadležne institucije o zločinima koji su se događali u Gospiću. Kada nadležne institucije nisu ništa poduzimale, počeo izlaziti u javnost već od 1993. govoreći o nepravdama koje su počinjene prema njegovim sugrađanima, gospićkim Srbima, ali i nekim Hrvatima koji se ili nisu slagali sa takvom politikom etničkog čišćenja koja se provodila u Gospiću ili su na bilo koji drugi način smetali ljudima koji su tada vladali Gospićem.
His fight brought him all the way to the International Criminal Court where he testified. After that, however, extreme elements in Croatia decided to silence Milan Levar.
Podmetnutom bombom je ubijen u svom dvorištu. 2000. godine kad je bilo praktički puni mir.
Milan Levar je bio simbol Hrvata koji se s time nije mirio, simbol Hrvata koji je htio pravednu Hrvatsku, zbog toga je on ubijen. Vlast je procesuirala djelomično taj zločin, otkrila je za 50 ubijenih osoba tijela, kaznila je trojicu odgovornih sa po 15, 12 i 10 godina i tu se zaustavila.
Instead of building peaceful and trusting relationships between the warring sides in Croatia, in 1992, the Pentagon was too busy proclaiming its imperial hegemony over the world in its defense planning guide. According to the New York Times of 1992, this document asserts that the only possible course for the U.S. to pursue is complete world domination, and it adds that no other country has the right to aspire to the role of leadership, even as a regional power.
It's simply looked upon itself now as the supreme power in a unipolar world, and that they could do whatever they wanted to do.
Yugoslavia had to be broken down, and there was no better symbol for Yugoslavia than its Central Republic of Bosnia. War erupted into the worst bloodbath in Europe since World War II.
Civil war. Civil war is the worst kind of war. It involves brother versus brother, family member versus family member, and it is one of the ugliest kind of conflicts.
The Serbs wanted to have control over the lands mainly inhabited by Serbs, including lands that were of a strategic importance to them. The Croats wanted the same for themselves, while the Bosnian Muslims, or Bosniaks as they're called today, wanted it all. To achieve this, the Bosnian government, now increasingly representing the Bosniak voice, started getting help from the Americans.
The secret flights started arriving at Tuzla. The Americans started to approve the delivery of arms to the Bosnian Muslims.
American President Clinton later admitted in a book that the Americans didn't enforce the arms embargo. Heck, but that's not all. Aliyah was also offered the help of hundreds of mujahideen. Come on, who can say no to these guys? Serbs, on the other hand, relied heavily on aid from Belgrade. As the Yugoslav army was the fourth largest in Europe, the West moved to stop Belgrade from helping the Serbs in Bosnia. So, in May of 1992, sanctions were imposed on what was left of Yugoslavia, Serbia and Montenegro. By October 1993, 90% of Yugoslavia's domestic drug production stopped. The average daily intake of calories had fallen by 28% compared to 1990, and 1.5 million people were classified as undernourished. 2 months later, over 60% of Yugoslavia's workforce was unemployed, and the average monthly income had dropped from $500 to $15. The markets and stores were close to empty.
Nema mesa, nema lekova, nema ulja, nema beli sijalica, evo molim svi.
As usual, sanctions merely hurt the people at the lowest rung on the ladder. People at the top benefit from them.
They forced the Serbs into what was
would happen anywhere. It was a criminal economy. The criminals became the king because we made it so.
If you go to Belgrade, what used to be the diplomatic areas are now all the thugs and goons that made tons of money from the war on the black market. More profiteers. Big time.
Slobo's government hijacked the country's financial system, while Serbia's citizens were duped by several pyramid schemes, most notably by those of Dafina Milanović and Jezda Vasiljević.
Ja uporno ponavljam da smo mi izuzetno pametan narod. Ja sam donela odluku da svi oni koji žive od Dafimen banke i dalje žive.
Narod, želite li bolji život? Želite li posao? Želite li penzije na vreme? Želite li vašu staru deviznu štednju? Ja to umem I mogu da ostvarim.
For themselves, of course, because both Dafina and Jezda got the hell out of the country with the people's money. The economic tragedy, triggered by the sanctions, was reaching its peak.
The effect was quite severe, especially in 1993. Actually, the inflation rate in Yugoslavia was the highest in recorded history. So, as I recall, I think it was something like 1.8 billion% inflation rate.
They even printed a 500 billion dinar note. The lawlessness was intensifying and the mafia was taking control. In spite of the catastrophe around them, the Serbs would not yield to the will of the West. So one man decided to use this opportunity to save an organization that no longer had a purpose. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, was a system of collective defense whereby its member states agreed to mutual defense in response to an attack by any external party founded in 1949. The purpose, really, became to protect the West from the Soviets, a counterbalance to the later formed Warsaw Pact.
President Eisenhower saw NATO as a defensive alliance that eventually the Europeans would take over. Instead, the U.S. has turned it into an instrument of power and eastward expansion.
But then the Soviet Union went bust.
The U.S. explicitly broke the agreement that was made with Gorbachev about not surrounding Russia with hostile, militarily armed states.
The colonization of Serbia is the bottom or second step on the staircase to Russia. We must be colonized because NATO learned Hitler's lesson. Don't have a two-front war when you're attacking the Russians. You have to neutralize Yugoslavia the way Hitler did.
But to do that, you'd need to create a case where you had to intervene against an enemy in Yugoslavia. Enter Joe Biden.
We face a blatant act of Serbian expansionism and aggression. This is no more a civil war than Germany and Austria and Czechoslovakia had civil wars in the 1930s. This, as then in my view, is fascist thuggery on the march.
He was calling Serbs horrific names at the same time that he had a very influential position on the Foreign Relations Committee of the Senate.
Biden was also emphasizing the importance of a new role for NATO, as seen in February of 1994 at the Senate hearing on the future of NATO.
Last month, while the Allies reassured themselves in Brussels that NATO remains at the bedrock of European security, crimes of a kind that were tried in Nuremberg a half a century ago continued unabated in Bosnia. Without a common enemy to unite us, we may find that our conceptions of what constitutes national interest may very well divide us.
He found the common enemy in the Serbian people, who were already previously demonized by U.S. public relation firms such as Ruder and Finn, hired by various separatist groups from Yugoslavia.
They not only demonized the Serbian leadership, they demonized the Serbian people.
The problem for the Serbs was that they were a little slow off the mark. They did not understand what was being done to them, and by the time they did, the whole Balkan region had collapsed into a state of conflict in which the Serbs were made out clearly from propaganda at the time to be the enemy of everybody else.
Thus, the U.S. quickly set out to act against the Serbs, stirring up a storm in Croatia. Operation Storm, that is.
So they came up with a plan where the Croatian army would launch an attack down into the Krajina and occupy the area that was manned by the Serbian minority. that had been there for, I don't know, 4 or 5 centuries. But it was declared that they were much too radical to permit to continue within the borders of Croatia.
And at a meeting on the Brijuni Islands, Franjo gave his go-ahead to General Ante Gotovina for the largest single act of ethnic cleansing during the Yugoslav wars.
Da nanesemo takve udarce da Srbi praktično nestanu. Jer to je važno, slušajte, da i ti civili, znate, da pođu, pa će onda i vojske, tako da kad pođu kolone, to djeluje psihološki jedni na druge. Znači, na taj način im dati put, a jamčiti tobože građanska prava i tako da.
An operation that lasted 84 hours in August of 1995 resulted in the death of around 2,000 and a quarter of a million ethnically cleansed Serbs. Slobo and his generals, the protectors of all Serbs, had abandoned them.
Šta da radimo? Poznavajte se kako znate! Gospodine generale!
Operation Storm, which was an American-inspired by some of my colleagues, because the people that were advising the Croatian army were retired American general officers, and who operate just outside the Beltway in Washington.
Franjo was very happy.
Nisu imali vremena da pokupili svoje prljave pare devize niti gaće.
With the Serbs gone from Croatia, the Americans moved on to Bosnia. Simply pushing out the Serbs from there was not so easy, so a different strategy was implemented. Presenting the conflict in Bosnia as a civil war, which it was, instead of a war of Serbian aggression, meant that the Western public would be confused and the water would be muddied. To intervene, the Americans needed to make it clear who they had to intervene against.
The Serbs started this war. The Serbs are the original cause of the war.
They are the complete aggressors and wrongdoers.
NATO was used to militarily continue the colonization process, but Clinton knew it had to be somehow justified to the wider public. Perhaps the best example of what we're talking about here is Srebrenica. Srebrenica, a village in Bosnia, was declared a UN safe zone for Bosniaks seeking refuge, but was never really demilitarized, which allowed Bosniak forces to attack neighboring Serb villages. Serb commander Ratko Mladic overran Srebrenica, with thousands of Muslims killed and ethnically cleansed.
What happened in Srebrenica was a stage-managed fall of the enclave to the Serbian forces, which never expected to conquer it.
The United Nations declared that this was genocide, even though UN observer Philip Corwin estimated that the number of killed Muslims in Srebrenica was no larger than the number of Serbs killed in villages around Srebrenica. But that didn't matter. Srebrenica was to be used for a much greater agenda.
There are trustworthy witnesses on the Muslim side who claim that Ali Izetbegovic told them that Bill Clinton had indicated to him, Izetbegovic, that 5,000 dead Muslims would be the price of NATO intervention on the Bosnian Muslim side. They believe that Srebrenica was deliberately sacrificed by Izetbegovic in order to provide this burnt offering to the White House that would be the justification for intervention, and indeed the proof of the pudding is indeed.
The Bosnia government had no choice.
Mr. Salajic, speaking for his government, said,
"We have no choice, and our presidency had no choice but to appeal for a military intervention in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
You cannot go this alone. The American public will not tolerate it. The alliance cannot stand it."
And intervention ensued. Here was NATO, an organization formed for the sole purpose of defense of its member states, attacking a country that has not attacked or threatened any of its member states. Louis Mackenzie, who was the Major General of the UN Army in charge of Sector Sarajevo, tried to warn the Americans of what they were embarking upon.
So I appeared in front of Congress and they asked me my opinion, and I said, start training your grandchildren to be peacekeepers in Bosnia, because you're going to be there for generations. And a lot of them are still there.
As heavily armed US and NATO troops enforced the peace in Bosnia, the press and politicians alike portrayed Western intervention in the former Yugoslavia as a noble, if agonizingly belated response to an outbreak of ethnic massacres and human rights violations.
A lot of the so-called liberal or left-wing or progressive media were themselves co-opted by the mainstream viewpoint regarding the Balkans. In other words, they had bought into this paradigm that was presented to them by the arms of the government of the United States and the EU powers.
Only the journalists who towed the line and found new ways to attack the Serbs, other than the ones that their editors sent them to tell, other than the stories that were pre-written before they came to the Balkans, those guys excelled.
Of course, the bombing campaign forced the Bosnian Serbs to surrender. At the peace accord signing, which internally divided Bosnia into a Serb entity and a Muslim Croat entity, all those responsible for intensifying the war were praising peace. This is the village of Vrbarje, near Sokolac in Bosnia, inhabited mainly by Serbs and Muslims. After the imposed Dayton peace accords, the villagers were aware of what this meant to them. And as the town became part of the Serb entity, the Muslims decided to collectively leave to their own entity.
Eto vas uplakani oba komšije. Ja. Danas se rastajete.
Da, kao tako.
Pa je vam teško?
Kako vidite.
Je li ovo baš lijepo da se komšije rastaju u suzama?
Ovo je sa svega srca, mog i njegovog, sigurno.
Živjeli ste toliko godina.
Koliko imamo godina, toliko smo živjeli. Živjeli smo.
Bez svađe, bez nesuglasica.
Ne bez svađe, ne bez suglasica, nego sa pomoći jedan drugom. Čitavog života do sada je bilo i evo sada je tako.
Kako je sad? Kako vam je sad?
Teško.
Recite po srcu i duši, je li bilo maltretiranja, je li vam bilo ovdje loše?
Nikad. Nije nam moglo bolje biti.
Je li vam žao?
Pa još nam žao rastaviti se s našim komšijama, oni su nama uvijek valjali, dobri smo bili, slagali se, sve.
Jesu li vas provocirala djeca, jel ste imali nikakvih problema ovdje, srpska djeca?
Nije ništa, sve smo bili fino, koji ranije što smo bili.
This video footage has never been shown anywhere before. It just didn't fit the image that the Western media had tried so hard to project. The tidy melodrama of the evil Serbs destroying everything non-Serb in sight. Do you think this would mobilize Western public opinion to intervene?
Nije bilo svađa, nije bilo pritisaka, nije bilo tuča, nije bilo.
Nikad.
Živi ste i zdravi?
Živi i zdravi. Nismo imali problema. Ni najmanji problem nisam imala. Svi su mi dolazili, i vojnici, i narod drugi, nikad me nije niko vala, ni krivo pogledao, Boga mi.
What? Serbs not behaving like genocidal maniacs?
Komšija nam evo došla, evo 2 dana, uvijek imam nekoga od komšija, prate nas, plaćemo svi. Tako.
Rastajete se kao ljudi.
Rastajemo se kao ljudi.
Human beings? Them?
I volio da se sredi ovo, da mi opet i dalje zajednički živimo kao što smo živjeli, da dođe jedno vrijeme, da bude Jugoslavija kao što je bila.
Human compassion was something that was completely normal to a young Serbian man from Trebinje in Herzegovina called Srđan Aleksić. Srđan's father recalled how his son noticed that the Serb police was arresting a man on an ethnic basis.
Srđan je vidio da policajci vode Alena, pošao je za njima da vidi šta je razlog što ga vode. Dogodilo se da su naišli na pijanog vojnika koji je oteo Alena iz ruku policajaca kada je shvatio da je ovaj musliman. Ovaj vojnik je izvadio nož da zakolje Alena na ulici kao na najgrublji način što se može oduzeti čovjeku život. Srđan se umiješao, pohrvao se s vojnikom, Alen se je skočio, pobjegao, Srđan je izbio nož vojniku iz ruka i pošao da ide. ali su naišla još trojica vojnika koje su izdaleka vidjeli da se iza hrbe sa vojnikom. Napali su Srđana, oborili ga, gazili ga nogama, udarali. Srđan je ostao na ulici unesvješćen, vojnici su otišli kao obavili su svoj posao i živjeli se na čovjekom. Srđan je prevezen u bolnicu, konstatovan izliv krvi na mozak. 7 dana se Srđan borio za opstanak, za život. 7. dan, na Savin dan, 27. januara 1993. godine je Srđan umro.
This is one among many stories of true heroism that never made it to the Western media. The West was more focused on escalating the conflict so they could have the excuse for jumping in for their own interests. As the world celebrated peace in Bosnia, the international financial institutions were busily collecting former Yugoslavia's external debt from its remnant states, while transforming the Balkans into a safe haven for free enterprise. In late 1995, the West unveiled a reconstruction program that stripped Bosnia of sovereignty to a degree not seen in Europe since the end of World War II. It was pure colonialism, consisted largely of making Bosnia a divided territory under NATO military occupation and foreign administration. This pattern of intervention was so successful that the West just had to replicate it in Kosovo.
But I think that the region is very important in geostrategic terms, and they saw Kosovo as a very potential country to actually secure their presence in the region.
But the West underestimated the importance that Kosovo has to the Serbian people.
My fellow Americans, today our armed forces joined our NATO allies in airstrikes against Serbian forces responsible for the brutality in Kosovo.
On March 24, 1999, on the order of Javier Solana, in an act of pure aggression, NATO had violated international law and the UN Charter by launching an air assault on Yugoslavia. The people of Yugoslavia, however, decided to show their true spirit by going outside, singing songs and having fun on their bridges in spite of the catastrophe around them.
Pre nekoliko sati proglašena vazdušna opasnost.
Da, i baš me briga. Clintone, i pobedit ćemo.
Hoću da kažem da je Clinton žena i nema srce, nema milosti, šta mu jebem. Izvinjavam se. Ako ovaj most bude srušen, mi ćemo ga napravimo za 3 sata. Jer tako smo u mogućnosti.
We thought the Serbs should last 5 days under the bombing, and then, no one expected them to run onto bridges and put on Target t-shirts.
The declared mission was to stop the violence in Kosovo and topple Slobo. Bombing Yugoslavia had the opposite effect, as the conflict in Kosovo only intensified and the public rallied behind Slobo. The reality of the war, however, was far too gruesome. Schools, hospitals, bridges, TV stations, and even foreign embassies were all legitimate military targets for NATO.
Things that they bombed, the power grid, and night after night they would hit the power grid, knock it out so that they couldn't pump water and they couldn't, the bakeries couldn't fire up in Belgrade. So denying millions of people access to daily bread and water, how does that affect the counterinsurgency efforts of the Serbian security forces in the province of Kosovo?
These were attacks on the Serbian people.
When civilians died, they called them, collateral damages, and that's what, makes you feel bad, because humans, they have their names and they're everything for their families, but for the rest of the world, they're just collateral damage.
They hit the cigarette factory in Niš 3 times. And it ended up being purchased by Philip Morris. Well, if I walk into a supermarket with a hammer and start smashing stuff and then say, look, I'll pay you a pittance for the remains, I'm a Viking or a Vandal.
Apparently, the cigarettes made in Niš were also killing Albanians in Kosovo, so they needed to be taken out.
Obviously, Philip Morris had an issue with the cigarette factory in Niš. It was one of their main competitors in the European market.
The real purpose of the war was to economically colonize the country, to replace the entire non-compatible domestic infrastructure with German-compatible, American-compatible economic systems. So bomb the car factory, the Yugo car factory, the car that managed to make it into the U.S. market.
The Yugo, it's the road back to sanity.
Bomb that to the ground. bomb the cement factories, bomb the oil industry, bomb all of the telecommunication systems, so you can sell them the new ones much more expensive, not any better.
If this was NATO's job, it had to have been well coordinated in advance. In fact, almost a year prior to the war, the World Bank carefully analyzed the consequences of an eventual military intervention leading to the occupation of Kosovo, and conducted relevant simulations which anticipated the possibility of an emergency scenario arising out of the tensions in Kosovo. This suggests that NATO had already briefed the World Bank at an early stage of military planning. The plans for occupation started before a good enough pretext to intervene was found. But hold on, occupation? Weren't we told that Kosovo was to be liberated from the Serbian aggressors who invaded it? Well, I have yet to find someone who can explain how a country can invade itself. History was twisted in a way that would give the West a believable pretext to intervene. After 5 centuries of Turkish rule, Kosovo legally became a part of Serbia in 1912. By then, a lot of the Serbs were long gone, and those that were left were again under persecution during World War II when the Albanian fascists took over Kosovo. Mustafa Kruja, the Prime Minister of Albania, was in Kosovo in June of 1942, and at a meeting with the Albanian leaders of Kosovo, he said, "We should endeavor to ensure that the Serb population of Kosovo the area be cleansed of them, and all Serbs who had been living there for centuries should be termed colonialists and sent to concentration camps in Albania. The Serb settlers should be killed."
The terror against the indigenous Serbian population reached significant proportions, with over 10,000 being killed in cold blood and twice that number being expelled.
Here's Tito with Enver Hoxha, the Albanian dictator during communist times. You see, one thing I didn't mention about Tito is that he didn't just want to be ruler of Yugoslavia. He wanted most of the Balkans, a federation including parts of Greece and Italy, Bulgaria and Albania as well. This meant that the Albanian dictator Hoxha was to be shown just how much the Albanians were well treated in Yugoslavia. So the Yugoslav Albanians, living mostly in Kosovo, got a better living standard than in Albania. Their own university, schools, newspapers, political institutions, cultural centers, everything in the Albanian language. Albanians from Albania were flooding into Kosovo with ease, and the Serbs were being pushed out.
Ovdje su bili 200 srpskih kuća, sada su svega 5. Sve je to otišlo od terora, od pritiska.
Western media failed to mention any of this. The official story was that Kosovo Albanians wanted independence because of Slobo's actions in the 1990s, which ignored the fact that Albanians demanded for Kosovo the status of a republic quickly after Tito's Yugoslavia was formed, around the time Slobo was born, and even held mass demonstrations in 1968. In 1974, Tito gave Kosovo, still a province of Serbia, all the traits of a republic, and this effectively helped the Albanian leaders to continue what was started in World War II.
You had a lot of low-level intimidation, attacks on individuals that are not dealt with by the police, in the sense that effectively there's no arrests that follow.
A New York Times article published on July 12, 1982, many years before Slobo came to power, said that the exodus of Serbs is admittedly one of the main problems that the authorities have to contend with in Kosovo. Regarding the Albanians who want to separate from Yugoslavia, Beqir Hoti, an executive secretary of the Communist Party of Kosovo, stated that the nationalists have a 2-point platform. First, to establish what they call an ethnically clean Albanian republic, and then the merger with Albania to form a greater Albania. And they were desperate for help. They needed it at any cost. Any cost, you say?
Adore you, now and forever. My dreams come true, 'cause I keep your name. When I grow, I will do for children the same.
There are a lot of little girls in Kosovo whose first name is Madeline.
If you want, we can talk here, we can go outside.
Mr. Glock, this is your group, your KLA, former fighters.
Thank you for the enormous amount of money you've raised tonight.
I must say, unto a thumb, I never expected that anywhere someone would make such a big statue of me.
You gotta hand it to the Albanians. They really know how to flatter the Americans. Trouble is, the Albanians didn't know what they were getting themselves into. In 1998, the KLA was still classified by the US State Department as a terrorist organization bankrolled by the proceeds from the heroin trade and by Osama bin Laden. As it became more evident that the KLA was driving events in Kosovo, the US realized they could use them for their own interests.
The whole northern Albania region was actually under the control of the KLA, not the Albanian government. And U.S. cargo planes were landing at the rate of 2 a day, bringing supplies and arms shipments. British Special Forces, CIA, U.S. military forces were providing training to the KLA. This was before the war. Germany was shipping ex-East German military arms to Albania with the understanding that Albania would provide it to the KLA.
The goal was to provoke a harsh response from the Serbian army so the West could pretend it's jumping in to stop the war and impose its policies. Slobo sent in the military and a full-blown conflict erupted in 1998.
1999. godine je prosto simulirana jedna situacija nerazrešivog konflikta Srbije i Albanaca pod firmom kršenja prava. Ljudska prava su tu poslužila kao mantra preko koje će javno mnijenje Zapada, pre svega Sjedinjenih Američkih Država, da prihvati legitimnost intervencije.
Certainly, everything the United States has done in Afghanistan and Iraq is far worse than what the Serbian military ever did in Kosovo.
If you're going to colonize a territory, you might as well put it on paper. U.S. State Secretary Madeleine Albright masterminded the so-called Rambouillet Agreement, which was modeled on the Dayton Accords imposed on Bosnia. Here, NATO outlined how it will occupy and colonize Yugoslavia in Annex B of the Rambouillet Agreement. NATO personnel shall enjoy, together with their vehicles, vessels, aircraft, and equipment, free and unrestricted passage and unimpeded access throughout Yugoslavia.
Naravno, oni su nas zato odveli u Rambouillet da bi nas udavili.
We intentionally raised the bar too high. We knew that they could not accept this addendum to the agreement, and the intention was to go ahead and bomb.
In fact, this annex was secret. That's right, it was not revealed to the public until several months after the beginning of the war. The document also went a step further and basically promised Kosovo's secession in 3 years.
The Kosovar leaders signed that agreement last week. Even though it does not give them all they want,
nope, they have to wait 3 more years to get it.
They saw that a just peace is better than a long and unwinnable war. The Serbian leaders, on the other hand, refused even to discuss key elements of the peace agreement.
Gee, I wonder why. Hey, do you want us to occupy you this way or that way? Of course, while the true details were hidden, the story was presented that the Americans wanted to protect the Albanians.
Some refugee, maybe we can show some refugee pictures. You know what? They break my heart.
Yes, it's horrifying.
America's been responding to this terror, these pictures that have been going on, and all these atrocities. You look at all the atrocities, all the misery and mayhem and insanity. There's an insidious evil that permeates this earth.
Many Albanians didn't buy it.
Ja sam Šitar, nisam pravoslav. Šitar sam, Albanac. Od Prvi svjetski rat i do danas nigde nisam živio bolje no u Kosovu i u Jugoslaviji. Država koja je najbogatna država u svijetu, vidi što radi na zlo u Jugoslaviji i narod jugoslavsku i šiptarsku. To je sve kriva od Učekehi, od Ameriku, od NATO.
Ali oni tvrde kako pomažu Albancima, kako sprečavaju humanitarnu katastrofu.
Bomba ne pomaže nikom. Nikome ne pomaže bomba.
I consider that the intervention of the West in 1999 against Serbia was made possible by the geostrategic interest that the Western countries might have had, and especially the United States of America.
This had nothing to do with the Albanians or the Americans caring about them.
Da li NATO piloti mogu iz vazduha da razlikuju traktor od tenkova vojske Jugoslavije? Mi se nalazimo na mestu, naravno 10-ak dana posle poznatog već pokolja koje je NATO izveo gađajući civilnu kolonu izbeglica Šiptara sa Kosmeta.
That's right, NATO killed Albanian civilians too. Lots of them. If they cared about Albanians, or Serbs for that matter, the West wouldn't have aided the KLA, which was directly linked to organized crime and the narcotics trade. You don't help anyone by aiding the mafia. After the highly publicized Rashak massacre, which was later to be revealed by Finnish forensic Helena Ranta as staged, NATO bombed Yugoslavia, but failed to destroy the Yugoslav military.
By the end of NATO bombing, only 13 Yugoslav tanks were destroyed, and a lot of those were old models that were left out deliberately as decoys.
The Serbs had ingenious methods of protecting their military defenses. They built wooden tanks, painted them to look like a real tank, and put an old heater or microwave oven inside it and turned it on. NATO goes by with hyper-high technology, sees the target, bombs it. Okay, those bombs cost several $100,000 per go, and the tar paper tank costs about $200.
Bili u jednom avionu, jedan Englez, jedan Bukarin i jedan Srbin Era. Sad ja ne znam baš kako je to sve išlo po redu, samo na kraju Srbin je bio najpametniji i sve je nadmudrio.
So, why did Slobo give in to NATO?
At the June 2nd meeting, when Marti Ahtisaari and Viktor Chernomyrdin came to Belgrade to meet with Milosevic, Ahtisaari read NATO's terms, and Milosevic asked, what will happen then if I don't sign? And there was a table between them with a flower vase, and Ahtisaari moved the vase to the side and said, Belgrade will be like this table. And he repeated the gesture of his arms sweeping across the table. And he said, in a week's time, there'll be 500,000 dead. And we'll be carpet bombing Belgrade.
Faced with Ahtisaari's monstrous threat, Slobo had no choice and signed the agreement, while Ahtisaari went on to win the Nobel Peace Prize in 2008.
This is a CBS News special report, part of our continuing coverage of the crisis over Kosovo.
Earlier today, Serb forces began withdrawing from Kosovo, and NATO suspended its 11-week bombing campaign.
The first step of the Western geostrategic interest was fulfilled in 1999, being that NATO troops entered Kosovo and then remain still in Kosovo.
Along with U.S. troops, which established Camp Bondsteel, their second largest foreign military base outside of Germany, an army of lawyers and consultants was sent into the now occupied Kosovo under World Bank auspices to create an enabling environment for foreign capital. And how was this done?
They set up an organization to manage the privatization of socially owned enterprises. And after a certain period of time, they determined that they would do this without any regard to legal ownership, that they wouldn't have to pay any attention to who actually legally owned this. They just basically confiscated it and privatized it, sold it to whom they chose.
Yugoslav state banks in Kosovo were closed down, and the Deutschmark was adopted as legal tender. Almost the entire banking system in Kosovo was handed over to Germany's Commerzbank AG, which guaranteed full control over commercial banking functions in the province. 1 second though, think about this for a little bit. Human rights violations, war crimes. Those are the reasons the West went into Kosovo, we've been told by the media, right? So why was the head of the UN mission in Kosovo most obsessed with taking over a coal mine from the Serbs? Prior to the bombings, Western investors already had their eyes riveted on the massive Trepča mining complex, which constitutes the most valuable piece of real estate in the Balkans, worth at least $5 billion. The Trepča complex not only includes copper and large reserves of zinc, but also cadmium, gold, and silver. The International Crisis Group, a think tank supported by financier George Soros, issued a paper on Trepča making sense of the labyrinth, which told UNMIK to take over the Trepča mining complex from the Serbs as quickly as possible, and that handing Trepča over to the Kosovars is ruled out. And in August 2000, UNMIK had Bernard Kouchner sent in heavily armed peacekeepers wearing surgical masks against toxic smoke to occupy the mine. This was done on the pretense that it was creating an environmental hazard through extensive air pollution. Of course, a healthy environment has always been a top priority of the West in Yugoslavia, even during the bombing campaign nicknamed Merciful Angel.
After NATO used depleted uranium munitions here during the 1999 bombing, military experts from Belgrade have registered an increased radiation level. Dr. Srblak was among the first to raise the alarm.
There is no other place in the modern world where so many people, and so many young people, die from cancer.
In this animal hospital in the south of Serbia, there is evidence of something going wrong.
And as it takes billions of years for uranium to decay, the shadow of the ghost of the Merciful Angel will hang over the region virtually forever.
See, that's perfectly fine. Meanwhile, the United Nations had handed over the management of the entire Trepča mining complex to Western Consortium. With a stake in the Trepča deal was Morrison Knudsen International. The new conglomerate was the Washington Group, one of the world's most powerful engineering and construction firms, as well as a major defense contractor in the US. Are any of the Western politicians, businessmen, or lobbyists facing charges for stealing from the Yugoslav people? For crimes against the people of the former Yugoslavia? Nope. Not a single one of them. Instead, to escape any persecution, they set up a tribunal in The Hague, the Netherlands, to try the Yugoslav people involved in the war.
The Hague Tribunal was founded in 1993 on the basis of the Security Council resolution rather than General Assembly resolution, which means that it is an ad hoc body created on the basis of political rather than legal principles.
When you're creating a colony, you only lock up the dissidents. Back in Belgrade, Slobo, who was declared the man of peace in 1995 when he handed over Bosnia to the West, after he was being stubborn about doing the same for Kosovo, got indicted for war crimes.
I think every major world leader knows that if they don't go along with the system, they're likely to be taken out one way or another.
After an extensive anti-Slobo campaign readily financed by Western wallets,
the EU and the United States have spent millions of euros in equipping opposition movements inside Yugoslavia with the necessary resources to fight an election campaign.
Slobo lost the elections in September of 2000, but wouldn't heel to his opponent, Vojislav Koštunica. Vojo decided that enough was enough.
Victory, victory, shouted the crowd. Slobodan, Slobodan, save Serbia and kill yourself, cried others.
Čestitam gospodinu Koštunici na izbornoj pobedi.
Slobo fell. But what next? The politicians were all back to quarreling over insignificant nonsense in the hottest TV reality show, aka the Serbian National Assembly.
Poslanici su se duboko u noć optuživali međusobno, a ponekad i psovali.
Tvrdeći da je poslanicima njegove stranke neko iz DS-a psovao majku, Aleksandar Vučić više puta je tražio od Borke Vučić da interveniše.
Ja sam se spremio da dam skroman doprinos tom putu u Evropu, jer znam šta vas tamo čeka, za razliku od nekih koji su u ovoj skupštini skidali kulahopke. Gospodine ministre, ja ću da vam poklonim jedan deo odeće koji će vam biti potreban za Evropu.
A još gore od Čekuovog i Tačijevog nadvojvode i Solaninog kaplara Borisa Tadića bi bilo da podržite, zamislite, za predsjednika vlade vojvodu od Meridian banke od 11 miliona evra.
Ja bih volao da mi ljudi ovdje iz radikalne stranke kažu: bravo Đeliću, to Božo, pokaži svima kako Srbin može da bude uspješan u financijama. Božo, to majstore, pokaži svima, mi smo ponosni na tebe. Jedan vojvoda od financija, Božidar Dejić, svaka čast.
Evo, ovo je druga cipela koja će ući u istoriju. a siguran sam da će danas obići i dobar deo sveta.
Bacanje cipela do sada nije zabeleženo u parlamentu, ali je bilo polivanja vodom i iznošenje iz sale.
Instead of focusing on the really important things, they allowed the further fragmentation of Yugoslavia. In 2003, the name Yugoslavia officially ceased to exist, thanks to the genius prescription of Javier Solana.
Je to onaj čuveni doktor Solana?
Jest, čuveni natolog, poepsolog I bombardolog.
However, one man didn't want to give up his country and its system so easily. Blaško Gabrić, from my hometown of Subotica, decided to make a radical move.
Yugoslavian socialism was much better socialism than any other socialism, like comparing with Russians or comparing with Chinese. We had heaven. If you can imagine a heaven in the earth, that was Yugoslavia.
Blaško explains who took away his piece of heaven.
The Western world, they want to talk, you will go to heaven when you die. They don't want to afford you a heaven when you are alive.
So he turned his property of 15 hectares into a new, fourth Yugoslavia.
If they destroy your factory, if they put everything on private, whatever we had, we don't have anymore, how you call that?
The West said this was democracy.
We have a very nice joke when Muslim people ask the priest, how can he explain democracy to them, to be capable to understand? So, well, very simple, I can explain that to you. See, when I go in the top on minaret, and you are down below me, and I piss on you guys, even you can piss on me too. That's democracy.
Well, jokes aside, taking away Yugoslavia's name had a more malevolent motive.
Yeah, when they take Yugoslavia away, when they call Serbia and Montenegro, West promised to the Montenegro, leave the Serbia alone.
Come 2006, after a controversial referendum, Montenegro became the newest country of the world.
55.4% of citizens voted for independence of Montenegro.
However, another part of the former Yugoslavia still wanted that title. You guessed it, Kosovo. In the same year, negotiations began between the Belgrade government and the Albanian minority over the status of Kosovo. However, the so-called negotiations were a farce from the beginning, as almost all the Western powers were promising Kosovo independence regardless of the negotiations.
Sooner rather than later, you got to say enough's enough. Kosovo's independent. And that's the position we've taken. The people of Kosovo need to know that it is a solid, firm position. And even though there's diplomacy and talks, but if it's apparent that that's not going to happen in a relatively quick period of time, in my judgment, we need to put forward the resolution.
Think about it. If you had some of the world's largest powers telling you that you can get whatever you want, why the hell would you settle for any less and try to reach a compromise? As anticipated, the talks broke down and Kosovo unilaterally declared independence.
It has been an honor to welcome the President and Prime Minister of an independent Kosovo to the Oval Office. I'm proud you all are here. I welcome you. I'm a strong supporter of Kosovo's independence. I pledge that the United States would continue to work with those nations that have not recognized an independent Kosovo to convince them to do so as quickly as possible.
Contrary to what Bush had hoped, the majority of the world countries didn't recognize Kosovo, and it didn't even become a UN member state. Thus Kosovo failed to become a country. What was absurd in this story is that the Albanian minority, which in all fairness did suffer greatly throughout the 1990s, thought that they actually got independence in 2008.
Big day for Kosovo people, Albanians, yeah.
How do you feel?
Oh, I'm feeling very good. This is like a dream.
As a Serb, I feel sorry for the Albanians because they've been duped even more than we have. They think they have an independent state. Kosovo is a U.S. military base. It happens to have some local color called Albanians, some local foliage like leaves on the trees.
Institucionet e popullit Kosovës do të përulet për jetë me respektin më të lartë për ju zoti president dhe Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës dhe popullin amerikan.
But whether they could decide to do something not consistent with U.S. wishes, impossible.
Do you think the Kosovo government could do anything without the Americans agreeing with it?
No.
Ne bi verovao da će moći nešto uraditi bez Amerikanca, Engleza, Nemaca, sile Francuske i te stvari.
Da li smatrate da kosovska vlada može da donese neke odluke koje nisu u saglasnosti sa Amerikancima, recimo?
Ne može.
Zbog čega?
Ne može. Amerika je Amerika. Ne može.
Ne verujem.
We listen Americans. America, there are 50 countries. States, yeah. So why Kosovo not be a part of America?
You would support that?
Yes, why not? They are just administrating everything in Kosovo.
The Americans are in control?
Yeah, they are pretty much in control here.
We are not independent from European Union and from America.
The formal channel whereby the international missions in Kosovo have the absolute power over all walks of political and economical life in Kosovo are represented through the international civilian representative, who has the right to expel any elected official or annul any laws that are passed by the Assembly of Kosovo. At the same time, there is an informal channel whereby the international community meddles within politics and economics in Kosovo through the ambassadors of the powerful countries that have been seen or presented itself as sponsors of the independence of Kosovo. The wishes of these ambassadors are kind of like orders to the Kosovo's politicians. Kosovo still remains a colony, and this colonization has actually degraded the life or the standard of living in Kosovo.
On the other hand, the people of Serbia's other province were unaware of what was being prepared for them. Smack dab in the middle of the Pannonian Plain, Vojvodina has always been an attractive chunk of real estate exploited for its fertile farmland. After Kosovo's declaration of independence, the West turned their sights northward. Towards the end of 2009, in an article published in The Economist, the situation in Serbia's northern province was described as being on the thin end of a wedge leading to Vojvodina's independence. After all, Kosovo and Vojvodina had equally extensive autonomy.
Magazin Economist je ozbiljan magazin i utoliko ta informacija je onespokojavajuća.
And why did nobody take action? What's with the silence? You see, there's a way to get people to do something in Serbia, or any other Yugoslav country for that matter. Just tell them it's another step towards bringing them closer to the European Union. The EU, a unique political and economic partnership of European countries, provides states with an exchange of goods, people and ideas on a market that includes around 1 billion inhabitants. Apart from the official definition, there's more to it than the eye can see.
The European Union is a project of the elite class of Europe that denies the value of the genuine heritage of European civilization and seeks to replace it with politically correct dictate of the ideology of postmodernism and post-nationalism.
First, your country has to open its market to EU products and sell all its banks, which is like giving away your queen and rook in a game of chess. Then your country's domestic industry, agriculture and money market goes bust, which allows foreign companies to get a good purchase price on your most valuable assets. If we continue the chess analogy, your government is playing as a beginner against the EU, who is 10 steps ahead of you. You may know how to move the figures, but your opponent knows how to draw you to thin ice and get what he wants. Checkmate. In the Czech Republic, the EU forced the sugar industry to close their factories. Because the EU had too much sugar it was importing from Cuba that made them bigger profit. Instead, the Czechs got a little gift from the Germans, their dirty industry, which they couldn't keep in Germany due to the Kyoto Protocol. In Hungary, the people's vineyards were first destroyed by French dumping prices, which then caused the Hungarians to not be able to pay back their loans to the banks, and foreigners bought their property at low prices. This is why the most famous Hungarian vineyards, such as Tokaj, are owned by the English.
There's no work, says this man, just poverty. The The situation has become worse since the sugar factory nearby Serench closed down last year. 80 people from Mrs. Ombor lost their jobs. The factory is being torn down.
I think you can see a pattern here.
These places, like the Balkans and the rest of Eastern Europe, were not supposed to be colleagues and equals in a brotherhood of nations, but rather they were supposed to be markets for Western industrial goods. They were supposed to be markets for cheap labor.
Nemačkog farmera da bi napravio puter košta $300 kilogram ili tona. Srpski proizvođač može da napravi puter za 200. Ali, pošto nemačka vlada daje subvenciju proizvođaču putera, taj puter košta $150. I taj puter je $50 jeftiniji nego srpski. I mi jednog dana dobijemo kompletnu lepezu uvežene poljoprivrednih roba, a naš seljak nema gde to da proda.
Bear in mind, it takes a while to join the EU.
12 godina mi treba potpuno da otvorimo vrata za robu iz Evropske unije, a oni izvoze robu koju subvencioniraju. I ona je jeftinija od naše proizvodnje. Mi nemamo pare da dajemo subvencije svojim poljoprivrednicima. Na taj način mi se od proizvođača poljoprivrednih proizvoda pretvaramo u uvoznika poljoprivrednih proizvoda. I na taj način oni gase našu poljoprivredu. Gase jednu po jednu granu.
You won't hear about these things in the media, though.
The European Union spends over 2 billion euros per year for its representation in the media. They sponsor shows on television, on radios. They sponsor programs and so on. They organize conferences, especially just for the journalists. It's a massive industry. You hardly ever hear criticism about the European Union from the journalists.
In Serbia, there has never been a true debate about the European Union, and any attempt to even initiate such a debate was condemned up front as anti-European.
Those who try to open such a debate are simply cut off.
Ja kad ovdje slušam, meni je jako smešno šta vi sve to kažete o Evropskoj uniji, pošto to je slovenski narod, pa i ja slušao 10 godina, ama baš bukvalno iste stvari, kod je to CIA štampala ili neko drugi. I pazite sad.
Pre nego što kažeš, mogu te pitam, koliko ti je plata?
Ne, čekaj, mogu samo ako možeš da slušaš.
Ja ću kritikovati globalizam na sva uzma.
Dobro, ajde izvolite.
Gledaj, pazi, niko više u Sloveniji ne veruje u Evropsku uniju, taj san, a prošlo je par meseci, pošto će sad 50.000 ljudi da otpuste, jer sve tvornice, ne sve, se zatvaraju, sele se u Rumunsku, u Honduras, čoveče, gde je to? I u Kinu, razumeš?
Na sreću dolazi u Srbiju neki.
Ti pričaš o nekim partnerima iz Slovenije, gde se glavni direktori koji ovde ulažu u tu zemlju prebacivaju, hvalisaju kako koloniziraju Srbiju, ceo Balkan.
I remember that guy, the neoliberal guy from the party G17+, and he told me, yeah, but you are criticizing the European Union, but hey, you live in European Union, Slovenia is doing well in Europe. No, it just doesn't work like this. This is a standard propaganda, you understand? We are not better off because we are in European Union. It's vice versa. We are in European Union because we did better off than other, for example, former republics of Yugoslavia.
After the death of Yugoslavia, every single former Yugoslav republic wanted to become a member of the EU. Slovenia was the first to actually join in 2004, but wasn't dazzled much.
We are no more a country, we are just a region of European Union. Why do I claim that? We have no monetary policy. We have practically no fiscal policy because we are very much restricted with the rules of European Union or Euro area.
Are things better now that Slovenia is in the European Union?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think it's better.
No, I don't think so.
The prices all just doubled. Everything is more expensive than it used to be.
The clothes are more expensive.
I voted no when we had the referendum for joining the European Union.
Sve je pokradeno, ne zna se niko pije, niko plaća, Litostroj, Metalka, nema niti jednoga preduzeća koje ima 500 ljudi, a da dobro stoje.
If you are part of the European Union, also you are giving something into the common wallet of Europe.
A lot of social rights that we had in the past are now being shrinked.
I believe that, and that's my personal opinion, that European Union is more of a corporation than like a political establishment that secures human rights.
Da li je u Sloveniji bolje otkad je ušla u Evropsku uniju?
Da, mnogo bolje.
Zbog čega?
Pa, ima razloga mnogo.
Koji su razlozi?
Mnogo.
Da li je život bio bolji za vrijeme Jugoslavije?
Da, bio je bolji.
Slobodnije je bilo.
Tito je bog bogova.
Right across the street from Slovenia, Croatia was giving up enforcement of the ecological and fisheries protection zone towards EU states, as 1/3 of all Italian fishing activity came from that zone. It also flushed away its banking sector.
Hrvatska ima samo još jednu banku koja je u njenom vlasništvu. Bila je primorana sve banke prodati strancima. Hrvatski Telekom je prodan Deutsche Telekomu. Mi dalje ne znamo sadržaj tog ugovora.
On the other hand, people in Serbia find it hard to stop trusting everything that comes from the West, often readily believing their propaganda that the West really loves them, and that even when they're bombing Serbs, they're doing it for the Serbs' own good.
I think the situation that we're in today is the result of something that I call predatory capitalism. And it really got underway in the 70s when I was an economic hitman. We used predatory capitalism in the third world a lot. And the first principle is that the only responsibility of business is to maximize profit, regardless of the social and environmental costs.
U Jugoslaviji su nuđeni vrlo povoljni krediti da mi uđemo u što veću kreditnu zaduženost. Ako ste ekonomski jaki, onda ste i vojno jaki. Onda ste jaki po svim pitanjima. Ali ako ste zaduženi i ako vaša ekonomija slabi, onda vi slabite na svim frontovima.
As Yugoslavia broke up, the federal debt was distributed between the successor states. At the end of the 2000s, the prosperity everyone was promised clearly kicked in. Montenegro, from a debt of $416 million, had acquired a debt of $4.7 billion. Macedonia had jumped from $890 million to $6.7 billion. Bosnia went from $2.1 billion to $16.5 billion. Serbia's debt increased from $5.5 billion to $38 billion. Slovenia from $2.6 billion to a shocking $56.3 billion. And Croatia, the absolute debt-acquiring winner, jumped from $4.6 billion to a dizzying $69 billion.
1988. 2 godine pre raspada Jugoslavije, Jugoslavija je dugovala 13,5 milijardi dolara i iz svetskih bankarskih krugova nam je rečeno da smo prezaduženi i da više ne možemo da dobijamo kredite. Danas isti taj prostor, podeljen u 6 državica, duguje 184 milijarde dolara i niko nam ne kaže da smo prezaduženi, nego nam još nude kredite.
Yugoslavs love to say how they lived off foreign debt during Tito's Yugoslavia. And now they don't?
Kako opljačkati jednu takvu zemlju? Ako vi kažete da hoćete da privatizujete nešto u jednoj zemlji gde su svi primali neke male platice i gde nisu mogli da imaju ni $1.000.000, znači niko od građana Jugoslavije nije mogao da kupi ni jednu fabriku u toj zemlji. Znači, te fabrike su mogle da kupi samo stranci.
Okay, so they were bought by foreigners. What's so bad about that?
Smederevsku železaru da bi izgradili, uzeli smo kredite od međunarodnih finansijera od $600 miliona. I za $600 miliona smo je izgradili. A prodali smo je američkom US Steelu za 23 miliona dolara. Toliko košta samo zemljište na kome se železara nalazi. Tako je urađeno sa svim kapitalnim objektima u ovoj zemlji.
On the other hand, here's one example of how they robbed the reduced Yugoslavia with loans. First, they enforced heavy sanctions.
Tada su oni od 92. zaračunavali redovne kamate, zatezne kamate i takozvane kaznene kamate. I naš dug se od 5,2 milijarde koje je pripadao Srbiji i Crnoj Gori popeo na 13,5 milijardi dolara. 2000. kad je srušen Milošević, postavljen je za potpredsjednika vlade zaduženog za financije Labus.
Miroljub Labus was, by the way, a member of the G17, those so-called pro-IMF experts.
Labus je došao i jednim perom potpisao da mi prihvatamo da platimo sve kamate, redovne, zatezne i kaznene za period od 8 godina, od 1992. do 2000. I uveo tu Jugoslaviju u jedan potpuno dužničko ropstvo, jer smo mi platili 8,5 milijarde Zapadu, a oni su nas blokirali, nismo mi njih blokirali.
In 2008, Croatia earned $9.3 billion from tourism, which amounts to some 20% of Croatia's overall GDP. And this would have been great had the money actually stayed in Croatia.
Sve hotele, najbolje hotele na Jadranskoj obali su kupili nemačke i austrijske kompanije.
Of those 9.3 billion, Croatia was left with small waiter salaries, wage taxes, the goods and services tax of 19%, and a handful of euros from restaurants, cafes, and private accommodation, while the profit went to Germany. With the macroeconomic stability at stake in all the republics, the IMF and World Bank step in to save the day. And how do they do it? Let's say the IMF and World Bank give you a loan of $300 million, to which you have to pay an interest of 5.5 to 7%. But the money doesn't go anywhere. No, it stays in big American or German banks, as well as the Republic's foreign exchange reserves, to which you get 2 to 2.5% interest. Then, those same banks, with essentially the Republic's money, give investment loans to the Republics through different development funds, which again increases their debt that they can repay only with fresh new loans. Thus, the cycle continues.
Ne trebaš biti ekonomista, znači ti uzimaš dug da bi vratio novi dug. To je kamata na kamatu, to je eksponencijalna funkcija, to je banalna stvar.
What does this mean to the people? Well, if we divide up every country's debt by its population, this is how much every citizen would have to pay. Yet many people still think that foreign factors want to help them.
Želi su uništiti, i to se uspješno, nažalost, radi dosta dobro, vjera u vlastite mogućnosti, vlastite sposobnosti. Kaže, nije to samo za Hrvatsku, to se svugdje, po istom principu svugdje radi. Kao, ne možemo sami, moramo pomoć ovoga, pomoć onoga, kao neko će nam pomoći, pogotovo da će nam pomoći te svjetske banke ili takve strukture. To je jedna obmana, jedna laž, znači iz te laži treba izići van.
Foreign banks used the desperate state of the Yugoslav population for their own gains, sometimes by criminal means.
Hypo Alpe Adria banka, to je austrijska banka koja je prala prljavi novac sa Balkana kupujući nekretnine po Hrvatskoj, pa je onda ta banka bila prodana njemačkoj Bayerische Landesbank, koja je na kraju bankrotirala i sad njemački porezni obveznici moraju platiti 3 milijarde eura za sanaciju te banke.
The dire situation was made worse by the world financial crisis, so Croatia looked at what else the country had a lot of that it could sell. That's right, islands. In 2009, Britain's independent newspaper announced that Croatia wants to sell the Brijuni Islands, which is also a national park, and located on it, Tito's luxurious former residence.
Milioni su vrlo atraktivni i u tom smislu su izabrani da budu jedan špic kojim se želi probiti, znači taj psihološki barijera u narodu da se odrekne svog teritorija doslovce, svojeg najljepšeg dijela teritorija ili jednog od najljepših.
Meanwhile, in the colony of Bosnia, the IMF added Article 7 to Bosnia's new constitution, drawn up in Dayton, Ohio. They decided that the governing board of the central bank shall consist of a governor appointed by the International Monetary Fund, and that The governor shall not be a citizen of Bosnia and Herzegovina or any neighboring state. Therefore, the government does not have control of its country's economy. But it wouldn't be fair to say that all of the money invested in Bosnia was used to repay its loans. Nope. A lot of the money did go to the Bosnian people, except that it went to a very few Bosnian people. Very, very few. In fact, according to an anti-fraud unit that was set up by the Office of the High Representative, $1 billion disappeared from public funds and international aid projects from 1995 to 1999. Where did all this go, one might ask? Well, for example, in the town of Sanski Most, money went to a horse racing track rather than developing the economy or infrastructure. If you're going to steal public and aid funds, you might as well go all out and gamble it too, right? The same mayor of this town also gave $450,000 provided by Saudi Arabia to his brother, so the guy can open a new bank. He also faces 358 charges of corruption. On the other hand, Montenegro relied heavily on cigarette smuggling to keep the country afloat during the war years. Its leaders, Bulatovic and Đukanović, claimed they never personally benefited from the smuggling. Which is really odd, considering that Prime Minister Đukanović was the 20th richest statesman in the world in 2010, more than 3 times richer than Nicolas Sarkozy and Barack Obama combined.
Milo Đukanović has been more successful than most in turning his entire country into a personal fiefdom operated on the basis of Cosa Nostra principles. In fact, I think his personal net worth is much greater than the one officially listed, that in reality he can claim to own everything there is in Montenegro.
Since these elites couldn't care less about anyone else, the people at the bottom of the food chain had to resort to desperate acts.
Vraćamo se domaćim temama. Svako skreće pažnju na sebe na svoj način. Setkerinci bi možda trebalo da se ugledaju na meštane Žitišta koji podižu spomenik filmskom junaku Rokiju Balboji. Ne bi li tako skrenuli pažnju na probleme svog mesta, jedine nerazvijene opštine u Vojvodini?
44-year-old Samir was born in Bosnia, and he is convinced that under these layers of dirt is the largest pyramid in the world.
Many youths realized what was going on and started fighting against what their countries were being turned into.
Our band's name is Beogradski Syndikat, which would translate in English like Belgrade Union.
Belgrade Union is a Serbian rap band famous for its critical views towards society's elite and criminal elements.
Znam da ovde je stranje, al meni je do jaja, jer bruka i sramota, koliko imam para, život ko na slici, al ne plaćam poreze, moj životni moto je, ima se, može se, pare su u špici.
Boško Čirković from Belgrade Union explained why not many people were taking action against the injustice.
A lot of young Serbians and the youth of the world just thinks about material stuff and, you know, going into the politics, they do it just to get more material stuff. If I was in the same room with the guys running this country, and the main guy is my ex-high school psychology teacher, I would conduct a real revolution on them.
Ovo nimalo nije politički korektno, ni levo ni desno, već pravo mesto. Ovdje nemate kontrolu, to je masovna reper. Zapitaj se dokle, kakav si to čovek, polizan i plašljiv, živiš bez slobode.
How that would turn out, I don't know. But some of us probably would not leave the room.
Oni su sistem, instrukcija, dogma, korupcija, teror, institucija, represija, ubija, mafija, murija, država hajdučija, kadija, sudija, a mi smo revolucija. Oni nije naša Srbija.
Down in Sarajevo, things weren't much different.
Mi potražujemo danas plate za 2003. 2004. 2005. 2006. i molim vas lijepo 2007. godinu.
Ovo je zemlja koja se zove Bosna i Hercegovina.
U ovoj zemlji se pljačka na sve strane.
I opet će najveću cijenu za to platiti građani ove zemlje.
Ne dam ostavku, neće ova vlada podnijeti ostavku. Neće iz 1000 razloga. Država propada, a vladajući kleptomani se sve više bogate.
Sve trpi, šuti, bit će bolje, bit će bolje. Pa ovo je država za požaliti.
Dubioza Collective is a Sarajevo-based band with a similar message to the one Belgrade Union had.
As long as people think that their impact on democratic processes ends up when they put the ballot in a box, then nothing's going to change, because that leaves 4 years gap to whoever is elected to do whatever he wants.
Jedna marka je za neke ljude misaona imenica.
Nismo na ulici, nismo niko.
To nije spriječilo zastupnike da uredno primaju plaće u srazmjeri od 3 do 5.000 konvertibilnih maraka.
The ruling elites don't listen to anybody. That's the thing they learned the best, because they even ignore mass protest.
Oni vrlo vješto koriste tu jeftinu priču nacionalizma i s njom zaluđuju mase kako bi se sve više i više bogatili. Protiv tih elita smo mi.
Sadly, the elite in power, even when the majority was against them, still didn't listen.
One of my very close and very trusted friends was at a dinner, a private dinner, at which the American ambassador Cameron Munter was present. That dinner was held between the election, in which the Radical Party, which is much more independence-oriented than the Democratic Party, had apparently won the election. They had the most votes of any party. And we were all expecting that, well, the people have spoken, there's been an election, the biggest party is going to form the government. And my friend asked Cameron Munter, well, Mr. Munter, it seems that your mission here has been a failure. The mission to bring Serbia under the imperial tutelage. He said, I wouldn't speak so soon. In fact, I'd watch the television tomorrow and see what the results of the meeting between Mr. Tadić and Mr. Dačić are.
Evropska unija pozdravila je dogovor koalicija okupljenih oko Tadićeve demokratske stranke i socijalista kao realnu šansu da Beograd dobije proevropsku vladu.
And as the government itself was formed by Washington, the policies and laws were also dictated from abroad.
The U.S. Chamber of Commerce is writing laws for the government of Serbia and telling them these are the laws we want you to pass.
Thus, the former Yugoslav countries started becoming NATO member states.
Do you know what it means to join NATO? You have to get rid of all your weapon systems which are domestically produced, domestically designed, domestically developed, designed for your terrain, to re-equip yourself with F-16s, F-18s, F-22s, at the cost of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars per plane. And your sons and daughters have to go and fight. And where do they want us to fight? They want us to put on the night vision goggles and go to Afghanistan and kill them dang ragheads who never did anything to us.
Profits and military gains were again being acquired from these economic and geopolitical colonies. The people were completely unaware of what was happening to them and thought that they were finally free and independent.
What happened to Yugoslavia could be considered like a classic example of colonization. It's sort of a new flavor, but it's still colonization.
Rather than trying to colonize the unsettled areas of the world, I mean, why not just create a mess and then fix it? Then you basically own a chunk of the world which was already developed and consuming.
They wanted a Yugoslavia whose rich natural resources would be at the disposal of multinational corporations, whose populations would work at subsistence wages, whose economy offered no competition with existing capitalist producers, only new investment opportunities. They wanted a Yugoslavia whose petroleum, engineering, mining, and automotive industries would be undone and de-industrialized. And they wanted to abolish Yugoslavia's public sector services and social programs.
And they did it. Furthermore, the harmony that the people of Yugoslavia had been building for the greater good was crushed. It is a stereotype that the hatred between the population in Yugoslavia was always there. The South Slavs traveled together to arrive in these lands from the north and found their piece of heaven around the 6th century. Hatred was later manufactured by greater powers, who saw it appropriate to teach the Slavs how to be civilized and democratic. Consider that for the better part of the 20th century, black people weren't even allowed to sit at the front of the bus in the US, while the Dubrovnik Republic actually abolished slavery back in 1642, when the US was still a British colony and didn't exist as a country. The Western hypocrisy was obvious. Why would a Croat really hate a Serb or a Serb hate a Muslim? Because of what someone somewhere did and who knows when? Because of what TV says? Hasn't history shown that these people were in fact able to live together? Or is this all irrelevant the moment someone starts arguing about who did what to whom how many times worse?
To živiš neprekidno u nekoj mržnji? Da li živiš u nekom neprekidnom strahu iza sebe ili nekog jednostavno toliko mrziš da ti se sva tvoja pozitivna energija bazira na tome da to prepoznaš, razlikuješ i da nekom iracionalnom silom manifestuješ tu svoju mržnju. Od toga se ne živi. Od toga žive bolesnici.
There is no such thing as biological hatred, that a certain group is predestined to hate another. Anyone who says any different has an agenda. Trust me. I know what you're going to say. Boris, all you do is criticize without offering a solution. Well, for the solution, all you need to do is look at the stories of those who said no to this madness, who decide to act as human beings during inhuman times.
Kad se čovjek makne ispod kišobrana kolektiviteta koji ga gura prema zlu, može biti plemenit i hrabar.
Da su ljudi bili i da je bilo većina onih koji su razmišljali kao moj suprug, naravno da do rata ne bi došlo.
Corrupt politicians, army generals, or war profiteers were to blame for the colonization of Yugoslavia just as much as the colonists from the West.
Nobody could have done this to us if we were not as weak as we are in defining ourselves and defending our own history. If we, as a nation, stand up, no one can keep us down. There is no cruise missile, there is no imperial power, there is no spying network, there is no media domination that can crush our people.
Yugoslavs must become aware that their countries are Western colonies, victims of rampant and merciless globalization, bound by economic, social, and political chains. If they don't, the weight of chains will slowly get unbearable. The land of the South Slavs, whatever you call it, has great potential shared by some of the most diverse and enigmatic people in the world. The East thought they were the West. The West considered them the East. Some of them misunderstood their place in the clash of currents, so outside powers exploited them for centuries. Enough.
Pozdravljam život jer sam shvatio suštinu, da nisu bitne stvari već što ostavljaš za druge, da samo zdrave glave možeš ostati još duže, iskren prema sebi, besmrtan za uvek, jer kad niko neće, rodi se ideja, od temelja sve trulo mora da se menja, i to je moja želja da sa novog pokolenja plove pravi putem, lakša za tonu poniženja. Nisam do siteja, tribus sam iz geta, nisam čim to mogu, ali jesam koliko treba, i sad neko smeta, što nisam prljav i bedan, umem udar se da vrati, i dodam im još jedan, pa nazad na početak, jer ovde sve je stalo, ovde laži su realnost, okruženje sramno, dok ne promenimo svest, jacivat ću se stalno, nema predaje povlačenja, za mene to je strano. Još uvek sanjam mračne oblake da prolaze, još uvek mislim kako jedna reč promenit će sve, i onog dana kada mene više ne bude, ni tada nema povlačenja, nema predaje.
Sutra da sve tako padne vreo kamen, kad upepeo na sve budem leo plamen, tad ću te pitati šta ti znače pare, titule i zgrade, sve je to za džabe, nećeš teći poštovanje za keš varajući gladne, ljubavi ima samo onaj koje daje, sve za roditelje, braću, ženu i drugare, sokole u jatu, verne sindikalce, što krče svoje trase kroz mulj i barikade, ne prateći ljude nego svoje ideale.
Da i gdje će opstati, baš će betonski blokovi i na noge će se podići oslobođeni robovi, mi stvorit ćemo bolji sve, to je perspektiva, mi smo nova ofanziva, naša borba je živa i dalje. Još uvek sanjam mračne oblake da prolaze, još uvek mislim kako jedna reč promenit će sve, i onog dana kada mene više ne